Welcome back for a review of One Piece chapter 1041. This was quite an action-packed chapter, and we have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right into the conversation. In the wake of Big Mom's defeat, Oda gives us updates on most of the major characters presently involved in the battle on Onigashima. Before getting started, let me quickly say welcome if you're new to the channel. I do weekly One Piece chapter reviews, theory videos, and discussions. So if you're interested, please consider subscribing. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. So starting with the chapter cover, we see Pudding punches Niji and Yonji for picking on Sanji when they were younger, which I suppose dispels any notion that she might set them free. I'm guessing that this Germa 66 excursion arc might not be so emotionless. Perhaps if their hearts grow 3 sizes, they'll return to Topland at some point in the not so distant future to rescue Niji and Yonji. Now moving into the actual chapter, we see a continuation of Momo and Yamato's conversation about Zunesha. Notably, we learn that while Momo had a brief conversation with Zunesha, he didn't learn any more details about the true nature of its crime. In chapter 821, Momo said he was going to stay behind on Zou, while Kinemon, Law, and the Straw Hats went ahead to Wano. The purpose for his remaining on Zou was to have a conversation with Zunesha, but it turns out he didn't learn all that much. I think perhaps this ties back to the idea that certain elements of the true history cannot be spoken aloud. In chapter 261, Robin referred to the Void Century as the world's unspoken history, and the people of Shandura were charged to hold the truth in their hearts and to keep their mouths silent. On that note, Yamato says Momo's ability to converse with Zunesha is further proof that he's the one who will lead the world to the new dawn. This is interesting because it seemingly contrasts with Pedro's assertion that the Straw Hat Pirates are the ones who will bring this prophesied future event. In an upcoming video, I'm going to discuss exactly what it means to be Joy Boy in greater depth, but as I said last week, I believe Luffy, like Roger, has inherited Joy Boy's will. Kaido, Big Mom, and Teach's ambitions of building pirate empires serve as a dark mirrored reflection of Joy Boy's forgotten kingdom of pirates, which may have been centered around Wano. It's certainly possible Momo is a direct descendant of Joy Boy, and undoubtedly he's going to play a pivotal role in the endgame of the series. On that note, based on what he learned on Laugh Tale, Oden insisted that Wano's borders must be open for Joy Boy's return, but the important details were excised from his notebook. It's likely whoever rescued the journal from the burning castle in Curry 20 years ago didn't want that information to fall into the wrong hands. Importantly, we still don't know who saved the journal, as Yamato said she found it by the riverside. When Momo confides his fears about opening the borders to Yamato, this prompts a look of surprise, and I'm not quite sure what she's thinking. We don't see her response in this week's chapter, but I'm sure given her reverence for Oden, she will implore Momo to see through his father's wishes. But it's also important to remember that despite his present stature, Momo is still just a young kid, and accordingly she'll likely encourage him by insisting he's not a coward. Yamato has formed a close bond with Momo over the past 60 chapters, much closer than she has to any of the Straw Hats at this point in time, and this is one of the reasons I still doubt her joining the crew. It's clear that Wano and Momo are not just important allies in this fight, but in the central arc of the entire series. This means they will have continued relevance even after the Wano arc ends. Momo may be stronger now, but he still needs people around him for encouragement and support. Just from a writing standpoint, Oda has chosen for most of Yamato's panel time to be shared with Momonosuke rather than Luffy or any of the Straw Hats. Don't get me wrong, there's still a very good chance she's going to join the crew, but her strong bond with Momo is one of, if not the main reason, I still have doubts. Before moving on, I'd like to quickly make note of the fact that Zunesha says it came to Wano to fight by Momo's side, indicating there's still something left to fight. I think this lends more weight to the idea that the Wano arc isn't as close to a conclusion as it would seem. In the next scene, we see Raizo has finally prevailed in his 30-long chapter Battle of Wills against Fukurokuju, and all I will say is that this fight was way more intense than I ever would have suspected. That being said, Raizo seems to be pretty seriously wounded, following suit after Kinemon, Kiku, Izo, Ashura Doji, and Kanjuro. Moving on, we return to Orochi and Hiyori as she at last reveals her true identity, much to Orochi's surprise. As I suggested last week, she indeed lulled him into a false sense of security and used sea stone nails to prevent him from transforming. I suspect Denjiro, who has now been absent for over 30 chapters, will arrive to help Hiyori settle the score in coming chapters. Personally, I'm still hoping Hiyori will be the one to strike down Orochi using the sword Ame no Habakiri, famed for slaying the Yamato no Orochi of legend. I'm guessing Orochi will somehow be able to transform one final time and wonder if Denjiro could be seriously wounded in the battle, joining the other scabbards near death's door. At this point, Kawamatsu and Denjiro are the only ones who haven't yet received a spotlight during the Onigashima raid. It was pretty satisfying to see Orochi's face as he learned Hiyori's true identity, that the ghost of Odin's daughter has been haunting him in such close proximity for so many years. On a perhaps unrelated note, Hiyori says the name of Orochi and Odin's favorite song is Moon Princess, which describes her but could also hint toward a prominent figure in the Void Century. The moon is one of the most important and frequently used symbols throughout the entire series, used to represent hope and the promise of a brighter future with the arrival of a new dawn. Luffy has certainly saved his fair share of princesses throughout his adventures, and so it seems reasonable there was such a figure in Joy Boy's era who perhaps held global significance. In the next scene, we see Izo, like the other scabbards, has been mortally wounded, but has succeeded in taking out one of the Cypher Pole agents, and though his mask fell off, we still don't get to see his face. Given the stated strength of CP0, Izo proved to be much more powerful than I suspected. The bowler hat wearing agent also appears to be in pretty rough shape despite the fight being 2-on-1. As a bit of an aside, I'm not entirely sure whether he's actually the leader of CP0. The masked agents are said to be the strongest, so he's certainly among the group's upper echelon, yet it also seems he's speaking to the other agents as an equal rather than as their leader, particularly as he relays and receives orders from the world government. Doflamingo met with a shadowed, bowler hat-wearing agent in Pangaea Castle during the aftermath of the Marineford War, and while it would appear he and this agent are one and the same, there are actually quite a few differences in their designs, so it seems quite possible the bowler hat-wearing agent is not the actual leader of CP0. On that note, he receives orders from the Five Elders to eliminate Straw Hat Luffy at once to prevent the worst-case scenario. At the end of chapter 1037, the Five Elders were alarmed by the sudden awakening of a devil fruit supposedly lost to the mists of time, the name of which was apparently changed when the devil fruit catalog was first written in order to mask its true identity. Oda cut back and forth between this conversation and the scene in which Zunesha arrived, which indicated the newly awakened power was somehow related to the island-sized elephant now entering the battle. Yet the intentional ambiguity of the dialogue left open the possibility the paneling is meant to mislead readers, and that the Five Elders were discussing a wholly separate devil fruit. In an earlier video, I explored this topic in depth and suggested that Otama's Kibi fruit could be responsible for Zunesha's arrival, and though I didn't think there was much evidence at the time to suggest the Five Elders were discussing Luffy, there is a bit more evidence toward that end as of the most recent chapter. That being said, either way, Oda is intentionally misleading readers into believing the Elder's concern is related to either Luffy or to Zunesha. If they're discussing Luffy, it introduces a whole host of new questions. The Gomu Gomu fruit was in the world government's control 12 years ago when it was stolen by Shanks, which makes it rather odd the Five Elders would describe it as lost to the mists of time, unless they only recently learned it was renamed. This would also suggest Shanks purposely stole the Gomu Gomu fruit because it was so special. It would also imply the Elders are somehow able to sense a devil fruit awakening anywhere in the world, as no one from CP0 is presently directly monitoring Luffy's battle with Kaido, and thus far, there has been no on-panel indication his fruit is awakening. Apparently, whatever fruit the Five Elders were discussing in chapter 1037 is so powerful once awakened, it was hidden from the annals of history, so if they are indeed talking about the Gomu Gomu fruit, then it's possible Luffy's new miracle power will grant him victory in his fight against Kaido. But I do want to make clear, I think this is very far from definitive. There's a very good chance the Elders are talking about a different fruit entirely. We already know CP0 are concerned about the potential destabilizing impact which may be precipitated by the fall of the Emperors. Thus, the Five Elders may be concerned simply based on the fact that Luffy is rapidly growing to succeed Roger, prompting them to take action and to issue the assassination order while they have the opportunity. The CP0 agent says that the Elders want to prevent the worst case scenario, which they indicate is based solely on rumor and hearsay. This could describe the awakening of the mystery fruit the Elders were discussing in chapter 1037, where it could be related to the opening of Wano's borders and Luffy, the rising star of the current age, becoming the next Pirate King and taking up Joy Boy's mantle, a topic which I'll discuss later in much greater depth. We next see these Straw Hats are recovering in the main hall of Kaido's castle as the island continues to fall apart. Frankie rescued Zoro, who may or may not be dead, just before he plummeted toward the land below, while Nekomamushi, Carrot, and Wanda moved back inside. I'll be interested to see if Carrot returns to the crew's side now that the battle with Perospero has been resolved. On that note, I suspect Perospero will fall with the Rebel to reunite with Big Mom and the rest of the Charlotte children as they make their escape. We see that despite his commitment to Nami, Zeus still cries hearing news of Mama's downfall, which, while played as a joke in the scene, further suggests that these Straw Hats still need to cross paths with Big Mom again in the future, and when they do, I suspect they will ultimately reconcile their differences. Lola promised Nami that her mother would someday help the Straw Hats, and while it's fitting the cat burglar has grown dramatically more powerful by stealing a piece of an Emperor's soul, I suspect that in the end, Big Mom will give Zeus her blessing to remain by Nami's side, reconciling whatever internal conflict he's still facing. And never did I expect to spend so much time discussing the conflicting loyalties and existential crisis of a talking cloud. We then see that Law and Kid, like Zoro, are completely out of commission and are thus unable to assist Luffy as we return to the rooftop battle against Kaido. I'm not going to say too much about the scene in this chapter review, as I'm presently working on a video series discussing all aspects of Kaido, including the mystery of his devil fruit, his backstory, and the coming battle with Luffy, but there are a couple of things I do want to make note of. First, we learn that Kaido was 15 years old when he joined Rocks 44 years ago, which means he sailed with Rocks for approximately 6 years before the incident on God Valley took place. Oda chose to draw this scene from Kaido's point of view as he met Linlin for the first time, and the fact that he chose not to show us young Kaido indicates he's planning a full flashback in the not-so-distant future. Lastly, as the battle resumed, Luffy says he's using his final Gear 4 before unleashing another barrage using his Snake Man form. This statement could be interpreted a couple different ways. It's possible that implicit in this statement is that Luffy might be holding off on a potentially more powerful technique, which is perhaps a risky glass cannon he can only use in a last-ditch effort. This would seem to support him sitting on a technique we haven't yet seen. However, Luffy's statement could also imply he's giving this last Gear 4 barrage everything he's got, that as far as he's aware, there's nothing left in the tank after his final Gear 4. In any case, as I will detail in an upcoming video, I believe Kaido's mythical devil fruit may impart him with incredibly good fortune, which may demand a bit more from Luffy than he can muster, even with Gear 5 or Awakening, thus necessitating one last push with the assistance of the 9 Shadows from Toki's prophecy. As they say in a one-on-one fight, always bet on Kaido. That's all for this week's chapter review. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.